The other way to work with the functions that the 5 common functions that we just learned is to have them on the status bar. It quickly gives you the statistics on a set of data that you have selected without you having to work with them individually. So if you select, say, 4 of the data here, you see that at the bottom of this spreadsheet on the status bar, we see all these 5 functions. The summation is 6,500, maximum is 4,000, minimum is 200, count is 4, and the average for these 4 numbers is 1,625. So it's a great and quick tool to get information on the statistics. Now, if you don't have these, what you can do is that you can right click on the status bar here, and then you will get this list which you can check or uncheck these options. For example, average is checked. So if I make a left click on it and another left click on count, left click on minimum, left click on maximum, and left click on sum. As you see, all of them disappeared. You would, by the way, you will only see these 5 common functions on the status bar after you select a set of data. So when I select these 4 numbers, now I'm not seeing anything on the status bar because I just unchecked them. So if you want them back, right click on the status bar, and now you can left click on average if you would like to see average. As you see, average appeared here. Left click on count, left click on minimum, left click on maximum, and left click on sum. Now you can make a left click on any cell. Now you see that you have selected 4 numbers and the statistics actually appear down here. You can select any set of data. For example, I just selected 1, 2, 3. The summation is 6, max is 3, minimum is 1, count is 3, and the average is 2. You can select, for example, this set of data. Now it's not that obvious anymore when, the set of data that we have here. But as you see, you can select it. There are irregular numbers. There's no pattern. So it recognizes that there are 11 numbers. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9, 10, and 11. The maximum is 800,000. The minimum is 2.5. The summation is 1,414,706.5. And the average is 128,609.6818. So very random numbers, but you see that quickly gives you a sense of what your data is. Again, if you don't have these common functions, you can make a right click on the status bar, and then you can left click on the functions that you would like to appear on your the functions that you would like to appear on the status bar. We can also modify these functions that we just studied them. For example, this one is summation of transportation cost. Let's say that you didn't mean summation, you meant average. So what you can do is that instead of summation, for example, you can put average, and then you can press enter. So now it actually averaged the numbers, which is 1625, and it used to be summation. So you can always edit a formula as well. So that's what we have here. So equal average, you can equal average numbers. Instead of average, you can have summation, you can have count, you can have max, and you can have min. So you can replace basically the function in the formula bar with a different function. Another function which is we are going to be working with, and again in this chapter we are working with functions, learning how to perform calculations on data. Among the functions, another function that we are learning is PMT function. It's actually a function that will that is used in or for calculating payments. So there are 5 arguments in this function, in the PMT function. One is rate, one is MPER, which is number of periods, which is number of payments. You have PV, which is present value of, for example, the amount that you're borrowing. We have FV, which is the future value of the loan, which by default it is 0 because the assumption is that you're going to pay off the loan. We have type, which is 0 or 1. So I'm going to walk you through the details of this function, and then we will take it to Excel and look at an example. So PMT function has 5 arguments: rate, number of periods, present value of the loan, future value of the loan, and type. Now, the rate can be annual or monthly. You have to look into the number of periods. If the number of periods or the payments that you're making are monthly, then the rate has to be monthly in the formula. If the payments are annual, then the rate has to be the annual rate. So you have to pay a close attention to the time horizon of the payments. Are you making payments monthly? Is it weekly? Is it daily? Is it yearly? So if you've got daily payments, then the rate has to be the daily rate. Now, just on that, say for example, you're making monthly payments and the question has given you annual rate. So how you should approach to this formula, or how you should use this formula. When you see that you're making monthly payments and you're given annual rate in the example, you have to divide that annual rate by 12 to get the monthly rate. And then you will put the monthly rate in the formula. And the number of periods would be the number of months. Now, present value is how much you're loaning, how much you're borrowing, amount loaned. Future value, now you see that for future value and type, it says optional. That means that we can basically leave them alone or do not input any value for them if the assumptions that we have in the example are the default assumptions. So what are the default assumptions? The assumptions are that the loan is going to be paid back in full, meaning the future value of loan is 0. If that's the default, if not that's our assumption, that means we don't need to put any number for FV as future value. Basically, we just leave it blank. So the amount to be left over at the end, that is your FV, and we leave it blank, which means 0. So you can go ahead and type 0 for FV, but you don't have to do that if the loan is going to be paid. So type determines if you're making payments in the beginning of the month or at the end of the month, if, for example, you're making monthly payment. The default here is that the number is 0, meaning that at the end of the month, the payments are going to be made in an example that is about paying back on a monthly basis. So if you're making payments at the end of that time unit, then type is 0. So that's the default. Now, if that's what the example is asking for, which payments are going to be made at the end of the time unit, then that means type is 0, but you don't have to put 0 for type. So in summary, rate and number of periods, they should follow the same time unit. If number of periods or number of payments are annual, or in other words, you're making yearly payments, then the rate must also be the yearly annual rate. That's one important point about rate and number of periods or payments. PV is the present value. It is very straightforward how much you're loaning. Now, future value and type, by default, they are both 0. And we do not need to put 0 if the example is following those default assumptions. Now, what are those default assumptions. Future value of the loan is 0, meaning that the loan is going to be paid in full, and the payments are going to be paid at the end of each month, in example that is about paying back on a monthly basis. If these are the defaults, we don't need to put 0 for future value, and we don't need to put 0 for type. We can just go with putting the numbers for rate and for number of periods and present value. So let's look at an example. $2 million is loaned. 6% is the annual interest rate. So the monthly rate is going to be 6% divided by 12, 0.5%. Now, why we did that? Because the example is talking about paying back over 24 months. In other words, paying monthly. So when we say, when we see that we are paying monthly, we have to convert the annual rate to monthly rate. How we do that? That's 6% divided by 12, which becomes 0.5%. So now we want to use PMT function. Remember that we said if we want to work with a function or perform calculations, the first thing we do is equal sign. Then we type PMT. The first argument is rate. Remember we said there are 5 arguments, right? Whatever comes between commas, they're argument. So rate is argument, and arguments are always separated by commas. So you have rate, comma, number of payments or periods, comma, PV, comma, FV, comma, and type. So you have 4 commas and 5 arguments. So we can just go with 3 arguments, which is the first 3, to have the rate, to have the number of payments, and to have the loan amount. So the first one is rate. We have got 6% divided by 12, which is 0.5%. One point here is to not forget the percentage sign. This is not half, this is 0.5%. So you should put 0.5%. Or you can put 0.005, which would be 0.5%. So you either put 0.5% or you can put 0.005, which then you don't need to put half, like the percentage. So the easiest is really, if you've got annual rate 6%, divide that by 12, and then you've got 0.5%, then just put 0.5%. Now 0.5% is equal to 0.005. It is literally 0.5 divided by 100. That's what it is. So the equivalent of 0.5%, whatever that is, you can just put it there. Or you can put 0.5%. It says we are paying back over 24 months. So number of periods or number of payments is 24. And present value, which is how much we are loaning, which is 2 million. We are going to pay the loan back in full. So that means FV0, which means we don't have to put it. And the assumption is that we are going to make the payments at the end of each month, which means that the type is 0, which means that we don't need to put 0 because that's the default. So let's just go to Excel file, and so we're going to have equal PMT. Now the rate is 0.5%. Now comma, as you see, the Excel guides you through these arguments, and it's the best to learn, you know, what these arguments are and what they represent, because then you will remember them. So the first one is rate, so that's 0.5%, comma. So you don't really need to memorize what comes after rate. Basically, Excel shows you, you know, what the syntax is, what the arguments are. So now it is asking you for number of periods. So we'll put 24, now comma. Now it's asking for PV, which is 2 million. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 zeros for million. And then as you see, FV and type are in brackets, meaning that they're optional. So we are going to pay it back in full. FV is 0. As it is 0 and it is the default, we don't need to put it. And then the type is also 0, meaning that we are going to make payments at the end of the month. We press enter, which is 88,641.22. This is the payment amount on a monthly basis. Now you see that it is red and it is minus. We are going to learn about formatting for numbers. As it is dead, that is why you see the negative sign. Remember, PMT calculates how much you're going to make a payment. So as payment is regarded or associated with negative sign, because you have to pay, that's why it appears with a negative sign. And we are going to discuss these when we talk about formatting for numbers.